back then, believe it or not. It was quite common to get a weird look from somebody when they're like, why would I want to do that? Like, my server has trouble enough staying up as it is. You know, find my downtime with some other website's downtime, it's just bringing us all down even further, right? So, like, downtime was a real problem, and combining downtime just sounded like a bad idea. Of course, there are certain types of APIs you just simply had to use, like a payment is pretty tough to do a swipe card SDK and process out bandwidth. So using a payment API made a lot of sense. But anyway, back then we didn't use a lot of APIs. But today there's lots of different ways in which we use APIs. Our own application now has APIs sometimes where we're building a services-oriented architecture, whatever you want to call it, and we're doing that purposely just to keep things separate with our own application. And sometimes you build an application and you want to expose a JavaScript or Ajax or something like that. You might expose it via like an API from the server down into the client side. That's super popular, of course. And then mobile. There's different types of mobile applications out there. You've got your traditional mobile app that well, I call it traditional, but it's your just web page that just shows up in the mobile browser. And you might be using HTML5 and a lot of those capabilities to communicate with the server via an API. But you can also have a mobile app that has the native code, which is in iOS or Java or whatever, and or iOS or Android, and you're using the native language there in an SDK, and you're not really using the web application. It's you make an API call directly to the server. And of course, there's server APIs, and now there's this whole thing, Internet of Things. Okay, and there's just an explosion of all these digital devices. They're saying now that Internet of Things market might be 10 times the size. Consumer market might be 10 times the size of the mobile market. So, that's a whole new set of things to talk to. So there are many cases where somebody's going to be building an application which might be involving many of these types of interactions. And so thinking about the API first is going to become more and more important. Right? So you may not have designed your API or your application thinking API first, but even if it's second or third or fourth, at some point, you're going to have to reconcile all of this. And so your API design strategy is going to start becoming very important.
I'm trying to figure out how to get it up.
So, what I want to do at this point is I want to make sure that you've all gotten that email if you were expecting one. Okay, and what I also want you to do is to go to the API designer. We're not explaining this yet. I just want you to get started on this process so we're not waiting for you later. Okay? Unfortunately, this URL is a little nuts. I have to work on that. But if you don't want to try to type this in, you can also just go to API Designer, MuleSoft. MuleSoft API Designer in Google, and we'll find it right away. So it should be the top results. Or we can try to type that. Okay, so you're going to want to create an account. It's a free account. It's actually an open source project, so you're not being locked into proprietary stuff. In fact, nothing in this class is going to be require you to pay for anything or sign up for an account where you're going to put your credit card in, other than if you're using your own cloud server. Obviously, that's up to you. Okay, so go ahead and sign up for that. We will be using that in our first exercise, which will start in about 20 minutes when we get to that point, or half an hour, whatever that is. What's that?
So I have not received an email yet. I wasn't sure where we are in the process.
Yeah, check. Yeah, so how far are you on that list?
What's your email? I'll send it to you.
Okay. All right, so at this point, let's double check. Okay, so we have a few people who have not received emails. How many of you have not received an email and you are expecting one? Okay. There's at least 3 of you?
Is it from campsite?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be from campsite, thank you. That's our application we're working on. So there's 3 of you that did not. And did you, that you didn't hear you? Okay. So, 3 of you.
Spam filter.
Yeah, definitely check your spam filter. It's a new application, so we haven't like gotten spam approved or whatever that is. Sorry, our domain name is still looking spammy because we're new. So check that, and we'll come back to those of you who didn't in just a moment. Okay, and is everyone who's trying, have you guys all found the API designer, the MuleSoft API designer? Okay. MuleSoft API designer. Search for it on Google, whatever.
So thing with this extract use to
Yeah, I think so.
local features.
Yeah.
So you can go to this site, API will can log in with your existing Sorry whether you are.
Oh, wait, did he turn that on? You know?
Yeah,
You did? Okay.
I think so.
All right.
Red lights on.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the design process. So let's just ask the audience, what would a normal API design process look like? Okay, it's actually not that different from developing software in as far as you're going to get some requirements and you're going to design it and build it, and just like with software, it's good to iterate and you get feedback, right? Now, put your hands up. Has anybody here done both waterfall and some type of agile? Put your hand up, okay? What's the driver? Why did we move from waterfall to a more agile methodology?
Faster development cycle.
But what enabled that? Okay. Okay, and the feedback loop was enabled via this thing called the internet. Okay?
Yes.
So here's an interesting perspective. If you're building hardware, does Agile work that well? Not really. Okay? You don't want to put something together quickly, send it out to everybody and say, give me feedback. Okay? It's going to be very expensive. So waterfall is still used. Big corporations that have physical things that they're developing or working with. It's just too expensive to iterate with some physical components. Now, we went to software. Software, a little easier, right? You can distribute the bits, give you feedback, right? Okay, that's Agile started kicking in there, right? Okay, great. I developed this, I throw it at you, give me some feedback, I make some changes, I throw it at you again. However, it's still kind of painful because sometimes there's a lot of integration that goes on, you're breaking things as you go. So there's still people using waterfall-ish methods around software, okay? What about websites? Not a lot of downside to deploying a website often, because you're the one responsible for the integration, and anything that breaks, you fix. Your customers aren't fixing that unless there's something that they've got going on in there. But by and large, web apps are a primary reason why Agile is so popular today, because of things like continuous integration, continuous delivery. All right, they give us a methodology where we can rapidly iterate on our application with very little downside, and we can get feedback quickly. So now you see this whole movement around minimal viable product, lean this, agile that. Okay, you've seen a lot of that, right? Here's the problem. APIs are more like software than they are like web applications. And the main reason why is because somebody is writing software on the other end that is going to talk to your API. And therefore, if you change your API too quickly, it's going to break other people's stuff. All right, and so the concept of, oh, I can rapidly iterate doesn't work very well by the nature of the API. It's the way it is. If you don't care if people are using it or whatever, okay, fine, but that's not why we build APIs. So we've got this challenge. And the challenge is we want to be agile. We want to get it out there and get some feedback. And we don't want to be stuck once we do publish it. But that's the way it is. You are stuck. Once you publish an API and you got users using it, you've got a lot of effort to version that API. Now you're maintaining 2 APIs. Okay? So, the development process is needs to accommodate the situation. And so therefore you want to get your API in the hands of people early before you commit to supporting it. And that's the trick. So before you commit, before you come out of beta, or whatever it is you're committing to, you want to rapidly iterate. Okay? Now, this might be, well, I'm just harkening back to the days when I first learned programming. Don't hate me, but I learned on Microsoft Visual Basic in the early 90s. Okay? It was an awesome tool at the time. Okay? I learned myself, so I wasn't a top programmer in college or anything like that, and I was able to quickly rough up something and present it to my customer and say, is this roughly what you're looking for? And they go, wow, you're done already? I'm like, no. This was just like a WYSIWYG, demo. It wasn't ready to actually be in production, but it showed something quick. And I was able to do that with my customers in, within a day or two sometimes. And that's what I think we want to do with APIs, is you want to get it out into your potential users' hands as quick as possible, especially if you have 1 or 2 really important customers, and just let them give you some feedback. And so that's why collaboration is becoming so important, is you want to collaborate immediately. The first thing you do is you want to collaborate. And so that's why I collaborate, and so there's a lot of different ways in which you could do that. There's different things that are important to different people. Different customers have different philosophies. MuleSoft hired us to write a white paper, and so we kind of talked about what was important for best practices, and we came up with what was important to us, and what was important to MuleSoft believed was important. And you can come up with whatever list is important to you. And then you use that as your philosophy for talking with your customers. Okay? You provide them with some guidelines. Here's what we are trying to accomplish. Here's what we are trying to do for you. Not just in the spec and what the API does from a technology, process perspective, but also from the perspective of overall, what is the type of relationship we want to have with you? Because in 2003, when we were building PayPal's APIs, we didn't really talk to our customers a whole lot. We knew what we were trying to accomplish, and we decided that we were just going to go build that. All right? And had we brought them on earlier, I think we would have saved ourselves from a lot of pain. One thing we probably would have saved ourselves from is not using SOAP. Can you believe that about 25% of our users were PHP developers, and PHP didn't really even have SOAP support? That was a pretty big mistake. But the point is, like, getting that early feedback, but it's not just about the spec. It's about your overall promise to them. What are you trying to accomplish by working with them, other than just simply getting the API right? Okay, so you have goals. You have you want to have an API thrill them. Like, what are the set the expectations high in the beginning so they can feel like they can give you that feedback. I'm not going to go through all of you right now, but it to be intuitive. And so part of what I wanted to share with you today is that part of the reason why we like REST so much is because it's built basically on the fundamental principles of how the internet works. And so it's sort of intuitive to how the technology that we're riding on actually behaves. And so that's one of the things you might find out from your customers. You know, do you want REST? You know, get that feedback from them. Does that work for them? Maybe they need something different. Maybe they do need something. Find that out early. You know, do they prefer XML? Some companies have a lot of XML tooling, and they might prefer that. So find that out early. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of this, but that's the main idea behind collaboration. So what does a design process look like? Well, I think it can probably look different to many folks, but a general design process when you're using collaboration would be you come up with your desired features. Okay, obviously you have to start somewhere. You might have already gotten feedback from some customers, but you got to start somewhere. Okay, and this is really key here. This concept of a mock service. Just like with my Visual Basic experience, I was able to mock up the form, put some buttons, throw some sample data in there, and get people bouncing around through the application. It actually looked like it was working. But behind the scenes, nothing was really put together. It was all a mess. Okay, but it worked, and it provided useful functionality that they could play with and give me some feedback. And so that's really what a mock API service is about. It's about putting something up quickly and getting feedback. I was going to talk about this later, but I'll go ahead and bring it up now. Has anybody ever actually created an API with no programming code on the back end? How did you do it?
Used Swagger and
Okay.
Patience.
All right, you're cheating a little bit, but that's okay. That's okay, you can do that. That's fine.
We all cheat sometimes to get the job done.
That's right, absolutely. I like, let's find those out. Anybody ever just put up a text file? Do you know how that works?
Yeah, Wiki?
Yeah.
Yep.
Sure, RSS, right? That's basically the same thing, right? So you could build your own mock service by just simply putting up, a JSON file and having a JavaScript pull it down, right? So that's kind of what we're talking about here. Is like that would be like a super rudimentary mock service. But that's pretty darn limited, right? Can't use queries or anything like that. But that is a good, simple example. But what is happening now is a trend more towards providing a more functional feeling mock API or mock service. So then you want to test it. What I mean by testing is you want to get feedback from your users. Provide them some sample code. Provide them some tools that they can use to query that mock API and give you some additional feedback. Maybe they can combine it with a service that they were intending to use it for and see if they got all the data or if the workflow is complete. Okay? It may not actually be usable by customers, but they might be able to walk through that workflow and see it working. So once you do that, you want to test it, and then eventually you got to build it. And one of the nice things about having a mock service is you can actually start building it while people are testing it. So you don't even have to develop the real one in order for them to test. Instead, you can start building it because there's lots you got to do, right? So start building the actual live implementation while they're trying the mock service. But eventually you got to build it. So after you've gotten lots of feedback from your users, you're going to go build your API. You're going to share it. You're not going live or public yet. You're still in beta. And you're basically going to go through that same process again, where you're going to iterate based on feedback, but this time it's the real service built. Okay, and then you stop using the mock service. And then finally you publish. So there's these two loops. And that's basically what we're proposing to you today to consider for your own projects, is to use a mock service. It gets you up and going quickly. A RAD, anybody remember RAD? Rapid Application Development, that's what I started with. RAD API tools is a way to think of it. And then build the real thing. All right. So I'm going to turn this over to Gopi, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the about RAML and the open source tool. So go ahead and take it away.
So what I wanted to do is just quickly introduce on the tools that we're going to use today. All of them, like Dave mentioned, all of them are open source, so something that you can use it beyond this session. To start with RAML, so RAML is something we initiated, not just Microsoft, by Box and others in the industry. What we looked at it last year is kind of looked at what our customers are facing, the requirements, everybody's facing. Introduce RAML. The key idea is to go with the design first method, provide the happy, have it open, and everybody kind of iterate over it. So I would strongly recommend go and look at raml.org where we specify and the project is there. Everybody's starting, it's a very active community, everybody's using it. We did introduce the list of essential tools that's needed for designing, publishing, enabling feedback, and a lot more tools. So what is RAML? Some of the key features of RAML is
You all read that?
Oh, yeah.
So we'll share you the link. So if you go to raml.org, there's a link to that. So the key idea is to have it, the spec defines more user-friendly, something that we can do our design and make sense. Right? So our business user to quickly understand this is what I'm getting as a customer. Right? So that's the idea. So keep it simple. At the same time, it's powerful. Right? So what we are seeing with enterprise is
Can you just speak up a little bit?
So, yeah, sure. All right. So what we have seen in enterprises, they started with this one API with different teams. It quickly can evolve. There's no standards. There's no way of doing that. Different teams interact with different customers from the same industry. There's no way of handling that. So all of this experience is kind of built into the initial version of it, but it is evolving. Once users start using it, evolving through the feedback and the language as well as the tools. So what are the key things that I just want to quickly highlight a couple of features that kind of helps you standardize. So things like resource types and security schemes, right? So one of the things that I can, if you wanted to enforce a specific security scheme, you can introduce that as a random construct and use it, enforce it across all the APIs. So we can work through that. The other part is sharing some part of it. So once you're building more and more APIs, there are common patterns. So you will have common patterns of the way you query the API or the way the results are returned. So RAML provides a mechanism to kind of temporize it and put it as a common pattern, and everybody else is using it. And I don't want to go through this.
What's the format that is being displayed here?
So this is simple text file. So there is no standard. It's a simple text file. You can import it into the designer, and it will automatically kind of. It will help you do this API processing. You make a change here in the designer, and it parsed and it allows. So we can go through the tool.
And what's its relationship with YAML?
So it's built on the language of YAML, so that we don't want to reinvent the basics of the language. We want to focus on what is API, specific concept that we want to introduce. So it's a living, breathing document, living, breathing language and tools. Once you guys get used to it, I would recommend go to raml.org, iterate through it, provide your feedback, participate in it, so you can even price it. I can help you look into that.
I'm probably diving in over my head here. And I mean, I work for, we develop test software. I work with telecommunications industry, very heavy, got to be exactly right, because if ours doesn't communicate with theirs, we're screwed. Work also with customers that are like, why are you even bothering talking about schemas? It's JSON, it's going to change tomorrow. The semantics are different. JSON's got, I don't know how many schemas that nobody, I mean, some people are using all of them. They all have your word, an active community behind them, but it's not the community. So I guess my question in all of that is, how is this different than all these other things that are kind of floating out there, or you know?
Wanna give it a shot?
Yeah, so unlike the XML-based standards concept, right? YAML restricts you, right? It provides very simple constructs. So far, right? So so it's not going to help you kind of make it like very rigid for like an XML schema. So it provides a very simple construct, and it's going to.
And what are those three?
So resource type, trades, security schemes. So those are the three ones I would recommend. Okay. If you have feedback on it, if anything doesn't make sense, I would recommend go to the forum and bring it up there. So it is evolving.
Can you say those three things again?
Security schemes, resource types, trades.
Security schemes, resource
Types.
trades.
Trades.
Just a quick question. Have you guys thought about making a tool that would interrogate the code and/or annotation, like JAX or whatever, and actually generate?
So, I'm gonna talk about that just a moment.
Okay. So let me just quickly. So these are the core tools that come up with the community. Once people start using design first, what are the key ones that essential ones that they need? So I don't think you guys can read it, but I'll send you the link. But first one, the API designer, you just drop in your YAML, whether you create it or just drop your text file into that. It automatically creates the language. It automatically creates these API definitions, document. So something you can make it, you can see it, you can mark it, you can share it with customers. Right? That's the idea of so it's encouraging towards everybody towards design first approach. What we recommend is build your API and market, even give it to your partners and developers, start building the apps. Right? So with a market before even you're thinking about your backend infrastructure. Right? So that's the approach that is kind of we have used with our customer. We have created. Right? So that's the designer. The second one is the portal. This is also an open source where you can publish it, you can share it with your customers, even when it is not in the market stage. Publish it and share it with your partners. Get your feedback from the portal, incorporate it, go back and go through that. The third tool that it's kind of evolved recently, that one is kind of okay. So once a YAML definition is defined and published, you quickly leverage it like a published Java object. So you can quickly connect to a tutor which has a if you have your own API. The notebook helps you connect multiple APIs. And we will use it today.
Designer, portal, designer, portal, notebook. You guys are gonna be playing around with these things. Okay. And for those of you who are, anybody ever know Yahoo pipes?
Yes.
There's a little bit of that in here. You can kind of daisy chain API calls. It's pretty cool. All right.
This is why it's like every day I look up new browser comes up. So it's like you picked up Osprey, which is coming up, which came out, which is coordinated for it. So this is kind of like evolving. People are using that in the community. And tools are coming out. We also contribute as well. So if a couple of months, last month when I looked at it, very few months. So it's a very active community. The number of tools is that's right.
Okay. All these now is yeah. Yeah. This is definitely targeted at REST. Absolutely. It's it's a REST kind of format. Okay. Now I want to turn this over. I think I'm ready here. Yeah. Okay. So. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to Eric. Eric is the one who really hammered through all of the examples and made this work. And when I say made this work, the reason why I say that is there are MuleSoft is obviously building tools because they would like to sell you an enterprise product that you can buy. However, they were smart enough to recognize that you don't get adoption by leading with something you have to buy. So that's part of the reason why I believe, and I don't work there, but I believe that they chose to take this in an open source approach. And so there are tools that basically can do everything, but the open source community is building. So for example, you asked about code generation. So the service that you will use, the notebook, the mock service that you'll use in this exercise, you don't know what code it's written in because it's a service, but it's written in Java, all right? Now that's great if you want to. That means that somehow there should be a way to take that mock service and run it yourself somewhere in Java, right? But what if you're a Node developer? You might want to have a version of Node. And so what we like Node. So there's this new open source project called Osprey that basically lets you run that open source, that mocking service on your own server. So if you're going to use, I don't want to steal the thunder here, but I'll just leave you with this. If you're using the mocking service, and now you switch over to your own server, well, wouldn't it be nice if there was some open source code that would provide you some of that same functionality on your own implementation that the mocking services provide? Right? And that's basically what Osprey does. And so it only came out it's still in beta, but it only came out publicly in public beta a few days ago. So it's been a little rough, but it's very, very cool. So that's what part of what we're gonna be showing you. And I'm gonna turn this over to Eric, who's gone through all of this and actually developed the samples and all that kind of stuff. And I will jump in once in a while, but for the most part,
Yeah, we're
Eric,
good to go.
take it away.
I think there's 3 minutes left in the first section.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
I was going to start by first demoing the API designer, and as was mentioned, it's an open source project. You don't necessarily in a real environment use this from this website. You can set it up yourself and use it in your own computer or whatever. But it's sort of a web-hosted IDE for writing RAM. And it's a YAML-based markup language to describe your API as a contract. It has an integrated markup service and then cobbled boards from here. And also there's one of the other projects is the API console, sort of API. Can you guys hear me all the way in the back?
You can speak up a little more,
Right.
please.
So on the right side over here is a console. So as I start writing out the specification for this API, you'll see interactive documentation popping up as you go, and it's got a lot of features that we'll get to as we go. But to begin with, I'm going to start writing this and using it, and show you what this found. So on the left side here is sort of file drawer, and our extended example is going to kind of be related to our campsite website. So this is going to be kind of an API that lists out events, and eventually it'll have like some session information as an example application. So we'll call this events service. And we've got your base information. So the next thing I'm going to look at is your base URI. Node convention used for 3000.
Okay.
Use whatever you want.
Is it possible to expand the or increase the font or something?
Control plus. Control plus.
Look at that.
Maximize your window. Put it F11.
sort of a guide, a palette, tool palette for help you put your, understand the commands for Rambler. And media type here is going to be, when you have your API call return, media type is going to default the data format of the return value. So I'm going to set this to JSON. Okay, now I'm going to add in my first resource to my API. Default notation is this slash restart. And since we're doing advanced name and description. And now I can add in a method. So I want to get events. This would be about the whole this is the description. Hold the way up. Hold the way up. It is very, it pays attention to your indentation. So now we're going to add a nested resource for a specific event. Call this event singular. And add a that one. Okay, this is very simple right now. There's not much to it. You can see that the console is already giving you some contextual information about this API specification. So it's nested here because we have two nested resources, and you have a little badge on the right for each method you define. When I click on that, you get you can see, you get details about the call here. You can see details about the request, and if I have a response to the line, this is there, and there's this try now. And I want to explain this. So this marketing service here, when I click this, so if we were to, if you can imagine a marketing service, it would need to return something as kind of a fill-in for an implementation that doesn't exist yet. But for this to make sense, we need to put in our specification some kind of templated response that we want it to send back. So the next thing I'm going to do is throw in some example responses. And once we have that, we have everything we need for this mocking service to work. So cheated, we did it beforehand. You see here I've got the same. I'll show you the console. So, okay, this is saying description. Oh, and I've added a specification for this parameter here, the ID. Alright, so I've added responses here. And I started off with the 200, which is HTTP successful call response. Given a little description. Okay, and then there's the body, and then you specify the type of the data format of the response you want. And we're all JSON here. And in this example, I've just got a mock response. I've predefined. I got 3 responses put in here. And I also put in XML, but we can disregard that. If you wanted to have different formats for your response that you can that the user side can request with the accept header, there's a way to ask for what data type you want and it supports that. But basically, this is the same as before, but I've added in these examples into responses for you. Now I can toggle this mocking service on. And what it's going to do as soon as the network connects, it's going to actually spin up the service, and it's going to comment out this line and add in a new one with a hashtag here. So this is a live service at that endpoint that you can actually run this specified API against.
Running on. What's a server? What's it running on?
What's
What's
it
it running
running
on?
on?
They've got it running on their service. So it's mockservice.mulesoft.com.
Is it Tomcat or?
Oh, I'm not sure how they've implemented that, the mocking service. But yeah, I don't know all the details of that.
So at this point, it's your APIs. You can even share this to start using, start building apps, start defining it, start iterating. So you just drop in your definition, use the mock service, and share it in your
Probably just a very basic question. Sorry about that. And can you just tell me what exactly the RAML is helping me with? I mean, is it helping me to implement and maintain my services or drive consumption? What is the core purpose or purposes which you are driving?
The purpose of the
Yeah.
Let me just
I think a lot of people will be interested.
this is something that's particularly interesting for me because I got started with APIs or formats with SOAP. And SOAP came out like 13 years ago. All right, and one of the very first things that I was excited about with SOAP is it was specific enough and detailed enough where you could auto-generate both your server-side code and your stubs and your client-side libraries. It automatically generate that based on the SOAP document, right? And but we decided as a community basically that for the most part we don't like SOAP all that much on the public cloud. And so REST has been what's been being the way. But until recently, there's been not a whole lot to help you auto-generate. There hasn't been a popular contract like this. And recently we've started to see them pop up. But that's basically what Amazon is giving you is this contract that says this API will behave a certain way, and I'm going to give you so much detail you can actually go ahead and auto-generate a server-side stub, and you can generate a client that will talk to that service. So it's still early, and there's not a lot of it out there, but that is exactly what I do. In addition to enabling this this mocking service, because you have again auto-generate a mocking service from that YAML document.
So you still need to fill.
Because I think it was mostly client side. I was just kidding. Okay, we are writing it, and we are just using it client side. Probably the use case, better use case would have been you use this, generate a service stub and generate client stub together, and then show it. Because this use case looks as if like I'm trying to do some reverse work here, right?
Well, just so you know, it is. I mean,
Yeah,
the
I
mocking
understand.
service is
Yeah, just to be clear,
a
yeah.
server-side
Sure, understood.
auto-generated code.
It enables tooling on both the server component and the client component.
Yeah,
So
but-
going through the client example first to demonstrate that as a process, a development process, simply defining the contract, divorcing those two sides so that they can work independently. You can continue your implementation. You have a mocking service enabled. So now your application development, you can have, if you're a company, you can have like special business relationship partners that will start coming right away, where they don't have the implementation available. You can expose what you plan to implement to them, collect feedback as you step through your design iterations and evolve your API live.
So this is for the first part where you actually freeze it and then probably you can maintain, or you can also do the backward compatible API still, right?
It's to kind of give visibility to everybody about what's happening, and they have enough of an implementation to keep working as the API evolves. And when you're all done, you lock it down and say, this is a published API. But I think we have to go to our break.
Well, we don't have to, but let's just kind of take a vote here. I think, did the next sessions already start?
Yes.
Okay, so those who are going to a different session already left. Okay, so the people here are probably going to stay, I'm guessing,
Yes.
for the next session. So what we'd like to do is get to a point where it makes sense to break. So why don't we do this? Let's explain to them what we're going to do.
I can demo the box service real quick.
Yes, and then after that, I want them to know what they're going to do. Okay. So why don't you go ahead and demo the mock service, and then we'll talk about it.
So the other part of why the tools will help building generating clients. What we are going to show is using Osprey generating server side. You find it as a designer, evolve it. That's the idea.
You still have to fill in the blanks, right? I mean, this is just basically your beginning point.
Yeah, you still got to think.
Yeah. You still got to do work, right? This isn't gonna.
That's right. So traditionally, right? So we go to implement the API, somebody writes the client code, you know. So this is the way I'm going to start designing it, over and everything else is next. For the tools to generate the client code, to build your apps, the next position.
Okay, let's let, go ahead.
You know, fill in the blanks. Which are the resource only. Sorry, man, I put
You are over here, and sort of stuff about already in the client.js file of the front end example.
Did you go, even though we should all have links to the example folder part, that's the email we were sent and it shows the campsite website and then the folder, or?
You click on the section in that campsite website. Then you have download.
There should be a section called Intro to Idea to API. Click on that.
In there is exercise one, and so in here.
Sí, cuando te enseñé. Ya no.
We wanted to run this locally, you said the construction someplace and get after.
Yeah, the email give you general instructions and then where the guide to getting started. And if you have any questions, let us know. Did you find that guide to getting started?
No,